Hey, and welcome back to Wildflowers Moonlight. I'm Alex, and today we're going somewhere. Actually, we're going to go everywhere because today we're talking about one of my absolutely favorite rabbit holes in astrology, astrocartography. And if you've never heard that word before, don't worry, you don't need to know what it means before we start, because the first time I really started exploring astrocartography, I had no idea how much it was going to change the way I thought about my birth chart. Most of us learn astrology by looking up. Where was the sun when you were born? Where was the moon? What constellation was rising over the horizon? But astrocartography asks us to take all of that information and look at a map. Suddenly, astrology isn't about who you are. It starts asking where in the world might different parts of you come alive. And once I discovered that, I couldn't stop looking. So, grab your coffee, tea, birth chart, or maybe Google Maps because you're probably going to want to look at it by the end of all of this. So come sit with me. We are going exploring. Have you ever been completely fascinated by a place you've never been? Not just, oh, I'd like to vacation there someday. I mean a place that almost feels strangely familiar. You see a photograph of it, you hear someone talk about it, you watch a movie filmed there, and something inside you goes, there, I want to go there. Maybe you felt the opposite. You visited somewhere everyone else seems to love, and you just didn't. Nothing necessarily went wrong. You simply felt uncomfortable, disconnected, restless. Maybe you lived somewhere that never quite felt like home. Or you've traveled somewhere and immediately thought, why do I feel so good here? There are obviously countless reasons we connect with certain places. Culture, climate, landscape, memories, people, lifestyle, our experiences. Astrocartography doesn't replace any of those things, but it does introduce a fascinating additional question. Like, what if our relationship with place could also be explored through our birth chart? That's the question that hooked me, because I already loved astrology, and I already loved maps. So naturally, somebody eventually showed me an astrology map that there was absolutely no hope for me after that. So, let's go down the rabbit hole. What exactly is astrocartography? At its simplest, astrocartography takes your natal chart, your birth chart, and projects certain planetary positions onto a map of the world. When you were born, each planet occupied a particular position in the sky. Depending on where you were on Earth at that exact moment, those planets could have been rising, setting, directly overhead, or at another important angle. Astrocartography maps those relations geographically, and the result is this world map covered in colorful lines. The first time you see one, it can look slightly terrifying. You see symbols and lines and planets and angles, and you probably think, cool, I understand none of this. That's okay, because we are not trying to decode the entire map today. But what I want you to understand first is that each planetary line represents a different kind of energy or theme. So imagine your birth chart not just describing different pieces of your personality, but creating different pathways across the Earth, where particular planetary themes may become more emphasized, and that's where things get pretty interesting. Let's start with the really easy example. In astrology, the sun is connected to identity, vitality, visibility, confidence, self-expression. So when someone spends time near their sun lines, you may experience themes related to being seen, expressing themselves, feeling energized, or stepping more fully into your identity. That doesn't mean move to your sunline and you'll immediately become famous. Astrocartography does not come with a celebrity guarantee, but it gives us a theme to explore. Maybe a sun location feels like somewhere you can take up more space. somewhere you feel recognized, somewhere you feel more like yourself. Now, let's compare that with the moon, which deals much more with emotion. Home, instinct, comfort, family, inner life. A moon location might feel deeply familiar, maybe even strangely like home, but lunar energy can also heighten emotions. So, a place that feels nurturing for one person might feel emotionally intense for another. Already, you can see why there isn't necessarily one best place on an astrocartography map. It depends on what you're looking for. And that's something I think gets lost when astrocartography appears on social media. I want people to know, where should I move? And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, for what? Because the place where you want to go build a career might not be the place where you want to retreat and recover. The place where you experience enormous growth might not necessarily feel comfortable, and that place feels wonderfully comfortable, might not push you very much at all. And then we stumble across everybody's favorite line when they first discover astrocartography, Venus. Because Venus is associated with love, beauty, pleasure, relationships, attraction, creativity, and harmony. So naturally, we hear Venus and immediately think, excellent, where is mine? I am moving there. And yes, Venus locations can be associated with relationships and connection, but Venus isn't exclusively romantic. Maybe you feel more creative there. Maybe you appreciate beauty differently. Maybe relationships become more important. Maybe you find yourself prioritizing pleasure or ease. And maybe you simply just enjoy being there. And when we get into planets with reputations that aren't as cute and sparkly. For example, Mars. Mars is about action, drive, competition, assertion, desire, energy. Mars location might motivate you, but it could be incredible for pursuing something. But that intensity can also show up as impatience, conflict, or feeling like you're constantly moving. Does that mean Mars lines are bad? No. That's one of the biggest things I want to establish about astrocartography. There aren't really good or bad planets. There are different energies, and different energies serve different purposes. For example, Saturn is probably one of the lines people see and immediately think, nope. Because Saturn is associated with responsibility, discipline, restriction, structure, hard work, lessons, time. That doesn't exactly sound like a tourism advertisement. Come visit your Saturn line, you'll develop character. But Saturn can also bring mastery, commitment, longevity, building something that lasts. Would I necessarily choose Saturn energy for a carefree weekend getaway? Probably not. Could it be significant for building a serious career or developing discipline? Potentially. And that's why context matters so much. The map isn't a treasure map. This is probably the biggest misconception I want to address today. An astrocartography map isn't a treasure map where one line marks your perfect city. There's no little X telling you move here and everything in your life will finally work. I actually think that interpretation makes something fascinating and makes it far less useful. Because astrocartography isn't about finding the one place where you're destined to live. It's about exploring your relationship with place. And sometimes the most interesting thing isn't finding somewhere new, it's looking backward. Where have you already lived? Where have you traveled? Where did major life events happen? Where have you always wanted to go? Look at a map. What's there? That's where astrocartography became especially fascinating to me, because instead of immediately asking, where should I move? You can ask, what patterns already exist in my life? And that feels much more grounded. So why did this change how I see the world? Well, before I discovered astrocartography, I mostly thought about astrology as something centered around people. Your chart describes you, someone else's chart describes them. Then we can compare charts and talk about relationships, but astrocartography introduced this idea that we could also examine our relationship with place. And I loved that because place matters. Where we live shapes us, the landscapes around us shape us, the communities we're a part of shape us, travel changes us. Sometimes leaving somewhere changes us, sometimes returning somewhere changes us. There are places associated with entire chapters of our lives. So the idea that I could put my birth chart next to a map and ask, what does this place bring out in me, felt completely different. And much more interesting than, where does astrology say I should live? Because that's not really the question I want astrology answering for me. I don't want astrology making decisions for me. Just like I don't want tarot making decisions for me. You might be noticing a theme here. I want these tools to give me another perspective, another question, another way to examine my experiences. Astrocartography does that beautifully. And this is important because I know what happens when people discover astrocartography. You pull up your map, you find your planetary line, zoom in, and discover it's running through somewhere approximately 5,000 miles away. Fantastic. Guess I'll pack. You don't have to move to use astrocartography. You don't even have to travel. You can use your map to explore places you've already experienced, and you can use it when you're considering a future vacation. You can compare places you're thinking about moving. You can explore why certain locations fascinate you. You can use it as a journaling tool. And there are also more advanced concepts like relocated charts, crossings, and different ways planetary influences can interact with locations that we can eventually wander into. But you absolutely do not need all of that to start. Start with curiosity, pick a place, look at your map, and ask, what's happening here? So, I also want to do a quick reality check here. I want to say something that I think is really important when we talk about astrology and relocation. Astrocartography should be one piece of information, not the only piece. If you're genuinely considering moving somewhere, please consider the things that actually affect your quality of life. Cost of living, employment, housing, healthcare, schools, safety, climate, politics and laws that may affect you, distance from family, community, transportation, whether you actually like the place. Please don't move somewhere solely because TikTok told you your Venus line runs through it. A Venus line does not pay your rent. Astrology can be a part of the exploration. Reality still gets a seat at the table. Actually, reality gets several seats. So, for this week's field notes, I want you to think about 3 places. You don't even need your astrocartography map yet. First, what's a place that's always called to you? Somewhere you've wanted to visit or live, or even if you're not entirely sure why. Second, a place where you've felt deeply comfortable. Maybe your hometown. Maybe somewhere you've traveled. Maybe somewhere completely unexpected. And a third would be a place that challenged you. Somewhere associated with a difficult chapter, major growth, restlessness, change, or transformation. Write those 3 places down. Then write a few words about how each one makes you feel. Not what you think you should feel, but what you actually associate with it. If you have your astrocartography map, then take a look. Are there planetary lines nearby? Which planets? Do their themes remind you of your experience? Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. Either answer is interesting because remember, we're exploring. We're not trying to force our experiences to fit the map. And one more thing before you go. There's one particular thing I love about astrocartography that I want to leave you with. It makes the world feel big again. We spend so much of our lives inside familiar routines, the same commute, the same stores, the same streets, the same little circle on the map. Then you pull up an astrocartography map and suddenly you're looking at the entire planet. Your lines stretch across oceans, through countries you've never visited, past cities you've never considered, and you start wondering, what would it feel like to stand there? What would I notice? Who would I be? Would I feel different? Would I learn something? And whether you believe planetary lines literally influence our experiences, or you simply use astrocartography as a framework for reflection, I think there's something beautiful about asking those questions, because curiosity makes our world larger. Sometimes that's reason enough to follow the trail. If today's episode has you immediately wanting to pull up your astrocartography map, I warned you. This rabbit hole goes deep. I have more astrocartography resources over in the field guide, including beginner-friendly explanations if you want to start learning what those lines actually mean. And if you're looking at the giant collection of planetary lines makes you think, Alex, absolutely not, please tell me what I'm looking at. I also offer personalized astrocartography map readings where I explore your map, important planetary lines, key locations, and the places that may support different areas of your life. There's also the Where to Bloom option for those times when you're comparing particular places and want to dig more deeply into them. And of course, you can join us over in the Wildflowers Moonlight Discord and tell me what place in the world has always called to you. Because I genuinely want to know. Maybe we'll start finding some interesting patterns together. But until next time, keep asking questions, keep following the trails that make you curious, and remember that sometimes exploring who you are means exploring where you are too. Stay curious, wander gently, and I'll meet you back here